A key component of the modern world economy, the chemical industry delivers products and innovations to enhance everyday life. It is also an industry in transformation, where chemical executives and workers are delivering growth and industry-changing advancements while responding to pressures from investors, regulators, and public opinion. Discover how leading companies are approaching these challenges here on The Chemical Show. Join Victoria Meyer, president of Progressio Global and host of The Chemical Show, as she speaks with executives across the industry and learns how they are leading their companies to grow, transform, and push industry boundaries on all frontiers. Here's your host, Victoria Meyer.
Hi, I'm Victoria Meyer, host of The Chemical Show. This week, I'm delighted to have with me Ron Zmich from Palmer Holland. He's the VP of CASE at Palmer Holland, which is an American specialty chemical distributor. Ron's been in the industry for 25 years, and we're going to have a great conversation today about distribution, chemicals, and all the things that go with it. So, Ron, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Victoria. Appreciate the invitation. And we're going to have a lot of fun today. I'm looking forward to the discussion.
Absolutely. Well, Ron, let's start a little bit. Just tell us a little bit about Palmer Holland.
Sure. Well, as you mentioned, we're a North American chemical distributor. We're based in Cleveland, Ohio. We've been around since 1925. Founded, in Cleveland. Specialty chemicals and fine ingredients are our focus. We sell into 5 major market segments, so we're aligned with 5 businesses. You mentioned CASE is the business in which I work. We have a plastics business, a lubricants business, a health and nutrition business, and an agriculture business. I would say one last thing. I mean, naturally, we are a conventional distributor. Logistics are core competency, but we like to say that we're as much a sales and marketing organization as we are a logistics provider.
That's awesome. In fact, that actually leads me very well into my next question, which is, what's really the role of distribution in the chemical industry, right? So it plays a big role, and yet I think sometimes people don't fully understand how it fits. So how would you describe that?
Yeah, it's in a couple ways. I think in the most general sense, we bring the manufacturer, we would call them principals, the manufacturing sector and the consumer sector or customers together across a segment of the market that otherwise might be difficult to make that connection because of resources on either side of us and then their reach. So we get to a segment, fairly large segment of the market on our principals' behalf, again, that they ordinarily wouldn't be able to get there with their own direct sales staff. We serve as what I'll call a spring in the supply chain as well. So both from just a pure product logistics perspective, and even maybe from a financial or a terms perspective, companies in our space can be a little more flexible, a little more nimble, and offer some services to the market that maybe the manufacturers can't offer on a direct basis.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know that having channel partners such as Palmer Holland tends to feature pretty heavily in chemical producers' go-to-market strategies, right? So obviously they see that you solve some different issues. So why do customers come to you, and why do your producers come to you? What problems are you solving, or how are you fitting into that landscape?
Yeah, great question. So yeah, I'll take that in 2 parts as you put forth. On the principal side, the supplier side, again, as I mentioned, we first and foremost we reach a segment of the market that they're not able to get to. And with that comes visibility. So they're operating with these large global companies in our space or any space for that matter, and they're certainly getting that view of the market. But I think we bring additional views, some that augment and some that are different. We get into some niche segments that perhaps they don't get into. So market visibility, market reach. For sure, because of the types of accounts we call on, and frankly, the number that we call on and service, we tend to get innovation traction pretty quickly. Smaller companies, more nimble. So as new products come out from our principals, we tend to get them introduced quickly, and probably as important, get feedback to our supply base as to what we're seeing. The overall service aspect of it. Not only is there not reach from a sales support perspective, but also on the logistics side, managing not only LTL quantities, but sometimes less than pallet quantities. A couple bags here, a pail there, is just something that a distributor does a little bit better than the manufacturer. And then, finally, probably a working capital. There's a working capital aspect of that, primarily based on inventory, but also on resources, that we afford them. On the customer side, it's similar, right? I talked about the technology traction. So, we're talking about customers in some cases that, might struggle to know what's the latest and greatest out there for, a coating or an adhesive, and we afford them that channel to learn. Certainly supply simplification, a buzzword these days is tail spend. So there's with many customers, there's this portion of their raw material spend that, they just buy it because they've always bought it, and being able to step in and help them manage that. So I'd say, probably the primary areas of where we're bringing value to both our principal partners and our customers.
Got it. Makes sense. And I know that it's interesting because tail spend is always supplier side that's viewed, obviously that's an area that distribution can help support as customers get into the smaller purchase quantities, et cetera. And it sounds like it from a customer perspective as well. It's interesting. So there's been a lot of changes in distribution over the last decade or so, right? So I know we've seen a lot of consolidation recently. There seems to be more activity in private equity. What do you see? I mean, you've been in the distribution game now for almost 15 years, I think you said. So how has it changed in that time?
Yeah, frankly, having worked for a big chemical manufacturer, also worked for a customer, and now with the distributor, I've been around distribution for my entire career. And when I first started, you had really what was a regional model, particularly for specialty in the United States. You might have 8, 10, 12 different distributors with defined geographies,
Sure.
representing a given manufacturer. And really what drove consolidation was consolidation on both sides of us, predominantly on the customer side. As the distributor's piece of the pie got smaller, as traditional distribution accounts got acquired by direct customers, you kind of had to figure out, okay, what do we need to do to back that up? So you started to see regionals extend their reach geographically. You also saw principals, look to try and do more with less, couldn't manage that number of partners, and you saw the consolidation. I'd say from a regional play to a super regional play, probably the better part of 10 years ago, and now over the last 5 years, really a push into the specialty space to more and more of a national play with a number of players, really extending across the U.S. There've been 109 transactions, M&A transactions, since 2010 in just what I would call the specialty chemical space. You mentioned private equity, right? That's certainly one model, and we continue to see more and more private equity in our world. I think historically they spent more time looking, at manufacturers and even customers, and
Sure.
Now distribution seems to be becoming sexy. So, but yeah, it's really, so the consolidation has it's evident, and it's something that the next 5 or 10 years, I don't expect it to slow down. What it has resulted in is, a few things. One, we're starting to see more offshore sources, coming to the U.S., both from Europe and Asia. 2 reasons, really. One, with a model that didn't exist 5 or 10 years ago. So if you're a European chemical company, an Asian chemical company that would like to get into the U.S. market, but you certainly don't want to, set up infrastructure and make that type of investment. But at the same time, from across the pond or thousands of miles, you don't want to manage multiple partners. Well, there really wasn't an option. Now there are options. So you're starting to see, longstanding, reputable, chemical manufacturers that just never had a channel, coming to the U.S. Conversely, because of the consolidation, it's like musical chairs. Unfortunately, if a supplier was once working with 4, 5, 6 distributors, and they consolidate down with one partner, there are 3, 4, 5 companies that no longer have that chemistry, but they've got tremendous tribal knowledge. So seeking similar chemistry offshore has been something that's picked up as well.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, just the offshoring aspect, because I think a lot of times, I certainly think more about the U.S. producing and exporting and trying to move their products to other geographies. But I guess the U.S. is obviously an attractive market still for many companies, and wanting to bring product in. So I guess that's it sounds like distribution has an opportunity to help with that globalization of the markets.
Yep, sure does.
Yeah. I know one of the other things, I talked to a smaller company a bit ago, and they said it's certainly like when Univar and Nexeo combined, one of their concerns was our two biggest suppliers are now one. And so trying to create diversity in their supply base is challenging with all these consolidations. So I would imagine from your perspective, there's both opportunities as well as challenges when that consolidation starts occurring.
Yeah, and great point. And again, it's almost with everything we do in distribution, there's a principal aspect of it and a customer aspect of it. So the point you just raised is in fact the case, right? So with the consolidation, yeah, Univar and Nexeo, that was a biggie.
Yeah, that was.
I make it a habit in my role to keep tabs on competition and keep tabs on the what ifs, and I didn't see that one coming. So that was a big one. But you're right. Because of the consolidation, because of the not just Univar Nexeo, but any number of others that have happened. There's fewer choices for customers as it relates to supply, and they're looking to diversify. So it's validates what you were saying.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk about like the past year. So this has been 2020, 21 has been crazy, right? So 2020 was supposed to be an amazing year. Then the pandemic hit, and that completely disrupted everything going on, life as we know it. Chemical industry across the board started looking pretty solid coming into 2021. And then certainly the Texas freeze hit. There's been a lot of ups and downs. How have you guys seen the markets over the past year and a half?
Yeah. Funny little thing. I remember the day, it was March 19th, right? So, we're 80 days into 2021. I remember sending an email to a colleague, and I signed it. It's, something like, December 100th or December, 2020. It just seems like, 2020 hasn't come to an end. The pandemic affected our business, I would say predominantly on the customer side. Okay. The good news is, for us in our industry, not just Case, but the other businesses here at Palmer Holland, virtually everybody was, declared essential. So with only a few exceptions, our customers stayed open, and they were making product and buying obviously at a lesser rate. When you make a habit as an organization, I mean, we're technical salespeople. I mean, we sell, the audience that we sell to our formulators, chemists, the R&D community. Sure. And when you send the R&D community home, it's awfully hard to really get anything new going. So we had to get through that period. Gradually, our customers managed to get back into their space. But even to this day, a large portion of our customers are not allowing you as a salesperson to come see them. Now they're back in the lab. That's good. Obviously we've become accustomed to this type of meeting, but it's still different, and it's still adapting to a way of selling that, we would have never thought we would have had to do. So the biggest challenge, I would say we face, and then driving customers to begin to once again look at new products, to begin to innovate again when, it was a pretty scary time last year. And sure. Really it was just, hey, keep the lights on, make what we make, don't worry about, getting too crazy about introducing anything new. We're starting to see that tide turn, and we're starting to see the innovation pick back up. So that's what I would say about the pandemic. It was probably more customer affecting than it was supply side.
Interesting. Yeah. And it's interesting that the innovation kind of stalled, right? So, because I think we saw aspects of innovation needed because supply chains were disrupted. But I guess there's an element of you go back to your known entities, right? So you're not looking necessarily to make change when you're in a really uncertain period of time. And it's, right. And yeah, absolutely. And if R&D is not in the lab, not able to take on the same activities that they were, you can't create new formulations. You can't innovate the same way that you might have otherwise.
But you brought up a good point as it relates to, supply chain or supply shortages that might drive innovation. So fast forward to 2021, although some of this started to surface in 2020, late 2020, due to, again, really strong rebound in demand, supply chain constraints due to, really, the pandemic, in the sense that what became a priority, right? Getting masks shipped, getting vaccines shipped, getting medical supplies shipped. So, put some constraints on, but the Winter Storm Uri really it exponentially made what was already coming into the year, what we saw, what were going to be some headwinds on supply shortages and supply chain constraints, exponentially multiplied them. I can say, when I look at kind of three components in terms of what we're dealing with right now, supply shortages for sure. Supply chain constraints widely publicized, right? Port congestions, no place on ships, no truck drivers, so on and so forth, and then price increases. And with each one of those three, I don't know that I've ever seen any of them as dire as they've been. We're seeing some optimism now, but if we go back to February, March, I don't know that I've ever seen it as bad as it was with any single one of them, and they all happened at the same time. So it's been a completely different kind of stress in 2021 coming out of the winter storm.
Yeah, that's crazy. So how do you navigate that, right? So I think you're in a unique spot in the market, right? And there's always a tension I've found that exists between the principals and distributors and then the customers, in the sense that when you're in supply shortage, the dilemma is always, which customer do you serve, right? And I would imagine that in many cases, your suppliers, the principals, have some incentives to want to serve their own direct customers. And yet you obviously fulfill a critical role in the supply chain. Your customers need you to support them. You need your suppliers to support you. Has that been a problem? How do you navigate that? What's the key to navigating that?
Communication. We've got an incredible portfolio of partners on the supplier side. And I would say, short of the most dire of circumstances where, they truly, force majeure declaration, and you kind of, it's a math problem, right? This is how much you're going to get based on historical purchases. We're partnering with some companies that are great. And like, listen, we're going to figure this out. It's probably going to be a day by day, week by week thing. On one hand, maybe we can't give you the visibility that you'd like, where maybe if we just made it a straight math problem, it might make it easier. But We're doing that in the spirit of being able to try and get you as much as we possibly can. And then by extension, we kind of take the same approach internally. So we're not a, slice it, sorry, you didn't buy enough last year, so you don't get any. So we really, there's not it's just a lot of work, rolling the sleeves up, communication lines open, trying to keep, what's in the best interests of the customers, as well as what's in the best interests of our company front of mind. Insofar as crazy as it sounds, as we try to work through these supply shortages, not necessarily excluding the idea of, last thing I want to do is say, as a leader of a team and a leader of a sales organization, saying, no new customers. I mean, our supply situation may not allow us to take any new customers on, but making sure that we're staying connected with the customer base, understanding their needs, understanding where the competition's at too. I think the silver lining or consolation with what we're dealing with now is everybody's dealing with it. So
yeah, I guess that's good, right? Everybody's having challenges, so you're not unique, which is, I guess, good and bad. And I think your point of relationships, right? So the chemical industry has been a very relationship-oriented business, and I would imagine, I think distribution even more so in some ways because of the variety of customers that you have and the multiplicity of relationships that you've got. So I think that's interesting. So I know, one of the big trends across the chemical industry is digitization, and even and I know you know I've chatted briefly. You've mentioned to me about the rising role of e-commerce. So I think digitization, e-commerce in the chemical industry has been perceived perhaps as threatening to relationships and some of the traditional relationships. How is that playing out for you guys?
Great question. An area that I'm thinking right now, as smart as I think I'm going to sound, our CIO is going to absolutely crucify me, probably with this answer. But we've I feel as a distributor, in fact, we've been ahead of the curve, certainly with digitalization and the study of e-commerce. You're right. E-commerce, is a little like, whoa, wait a minute, like that's the channel that we provide you.
Right.
What do you mean? So let me take them in steps. So digitalization, is really where we've made tremendous investment in actuality versus just what we can learn. So basically putting digitization. So the idea of taking data and analog and putting it in digital form. How do you leverage that? How do you bring value to both customers and suppliers alike? And the pandemic, I mean, it catalyzed what we were doing for sure. We had any number of projects or initiatives underway. Pandemic hit, send everybody home, lockdown, can't see one another. Like, uh-oh.
Right.
So internally, so whether it was accounting, customer service, marketing, we really fast forwarded a lot of what we were doing digitally, again, to both push content out to customers and suppliers alike, but also to streamline and make more efficient the way that we're doing things internally, whether we're in the office or not in the office.
So kind of digitizing some of your core processes, I guess, that just to make them more streamlined.
And,
yeah.
Right. And there are a lot of tools out there, and I give credit to our team, IT/marketing team, and not only do they evaluate any number of tools, but they're quick to get to the fail. If it's going to work, great. If it's not, let's learn from it and let's move on. When we see that it's not bringing value. I mean, to get into digital for the sake of getting into digital, if it's not going to show appreciable value, then what's the point? So
right.
E-commerce, that's another bag altogether. I would say, e-commerce is making progress in distribution, but slowly. I would say maybe gaining more traction in the commodity space, where price, volume, availability, plays a much larger role. In the specialty space, I think it's going to be slow to adopt. What we're finding is that not that our customers wouldn't appreciate e-commerce, but what they're looking for is more of a portal approach. So perhaps more important than being able to place an order online is getting access to existing orders, getting access to invoices, tracking information, technical documents. So what we're working on, and I don't think go ahead. I'm going to go ahead and announce it in a sense. We're working on putting something out later this year, maybe within the next couple of months, that we call an omni portal. So it's going to provide what our customers are asking for, what I just listed out, but it will also build in the e-commerce capability. When I'm not naive to think I'll say when that becomes important. There's some challenges with that, though, right? In the specialty space, with principals. Okay, it stands to reason. It's another channel to market. You're likely going to grow sales with an e-commerce platform beyond what you have now.
Right.
But in terms of the specialty space, I mentioned earlier, the value we provide, the ship a bag, the ship a pail, a couple drums, you still have the logistics piece. The chemical manufacturing world is not set up with Amazon warehouses, all over the country to be able to address that. So that's one challenge. And then a lot of these platforms, there's 3 or 4 different models. They're open price models. So I think if you're a specialty chemical manufacturer and you want to head down the path of e-commerce, you run the risk of really driving market pricing down to the lowest common denominator. And, if you go out and you see the kind of money that principals, manufacturers in the specialty space spend in R&D, I think you start to say, wow, do we want to take all that equity, sweat equity that we built into some really neat stuff and find it, being driven down. So you've got that.
That's a tricky one. Yeah.
Yeah, it is. It is. And it'll get figured out. that much I'm sure of. But
yeah, well,
right now,
right. And I
go
think
ahead.
one of the values of, one of the things I think that people across the industry rely on is the fact that there is actually differentiation, whether it be of product, of service, of information, and that is one of the things that allows you to drive some pricing differences, allows you to have that cost competitiveness. So, your discussion of that, of an open model, seems more difficult, and particularly when you're dealing with a lot of chemical products have inherent some underlying risks, hazards. You need to understand how you're handling it. You need to make sure it's going to an appropriate end user that knows how to use the product, et cetera. So there's still a lot of boundary conditions, I would imagine, around an actual sale. On the flip side, having more information about your historical orders and invoices, et cetera. I mean, who doesn't want that? We're used to that on a personal basis, right? Log into whatever account that it might be, whether it's Amazon or Target or another store. You can see what you've done in your purchase history and understand that. So yeah, there's a lot of value there.
Yeah, there's one component on the customer side I think is worth mentioning too. In the specialty space, the products, by and large, they're problem-solving products. So although there are certainly products that we sell that cater to e-commerce that could easily be bought that way, customers are looking for a channel to buy product, but also a channel to help them solve technical problems. And that's probably another area where because an e-commerce platform is just a straight transactional, hey, I can buy this product, but there's still a lot of work to be done, working with the R&D community to choose the right product in the first place, I guess is what it comes down to.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's a technical product. It needs to be formulated and supplied, right? I mean, it needs to be used, and you need to help them with that. So that's interesting. Do you find that, when I've talked to some other folks, they say their younger employees in particular are expecting this, right? Or maybe do you see this as a generational thing that'll start driving it? Or is it more just kind of an overall trend because of all of our human behaviors and what we're used to in our personal lives?
No, I think I do. Yeah, listen, I think that's why I said earlier, to me, I caught myself short of saying if and when. It's definitely going to, it's going to be a part of what I call a multi-channel strategy to market for both manufacturers and distributors. I mean, there are distributors right now that either have their own or are engaged in public e-commerce platforms. So it's not foreign to the distribution world. I think you made a great point because we've seen it just purely in the manner in which we sell. Yeah, there's a generational aspect of, man, if I can just stay behind the box or use my phone, you can't ignore it. You can't stick your head in. Somebody that's been doing this for 25, 26 years, you can't stick your head in the sand and say, no way, that'll never work. No, it's coming. It's like those people
eventually
that said, the internet, whatever. I mean, it's the challenge will be, again, figuring out how to fold it in and make it complementary to direct outside sales, inside sales, so on and so forth.
Yeah, absolutely. Interesting. What about sustainability? Sustainability is obviously one of these trends that it's got a lot of legs right now, right? So it's been around for a long time. We're seeing increasing interest, certainly, because of, the United Nations had made some declarations around sustainability. With the Biden administration, we're seeing more activity and at least talk about sustainability and environmentalism. How do you see that playing out for you in distribution? What's the role of sustainability in how you go to market or how you engage across your business?
It's another great question. So there's a couple aspects, I think, of sustainability in distribution. There's I think what the conventional piece that people think of, and in distribution, I think maybe not so much the largest global players who maybe also, in addition to distributing goods, maybe have some of their own manufacturing, toll manufacturing, blending, whatnot, where they've got a little more exposure, where they're truly, for us, we don't make anything. It's kind of like, what does that mean to a company like ours or peers of ours? Well, at a minimum, it influences who we partner with, right? On both the principal side and the customer side, making sure that we're partnering with companies that are forward thinking as it relates to sustainability. Number one, same with our 3PL partners. So we're a company that doesn't own any of our own warehouses or trucks, or we outsource. We have the supply chain competency, but we outsource the actual logistics piece. But it definitely comes into play, when we're working with, interviewing, selecting 3PL partners. How are they handling chemicals? How are they disposing of chemicals? So on and so forth. So, but what I think you'll see too in distribution, maybe not just in distribution, is sustainability is as much sustainability as a member of society or the member of the community as a chemical distributor. So, core values, community engagement, diversity and inclusion for sure, is really become a priority. So I think there's this sustainable when you think of, whether it's, circular, with plastics and,
right.
I think the more chemistry side of what people think of when they think sustainable, but now there's a non-chemical socio-economical aspect of sustainability that I think is gaining momentum within distribution.
Yeah, I think that's actually a really good point, because those are key elements that people look at when they talk about sustainability. It is beyond the item in use. It's the relationship to its constituents. It's the D&I aspects of it. It's a variety of things. So I think that's all really good. What do you see playing out over the next 5 years or so in distribution? So I think you alluded to maybe some more consolidation, perhaps, but what else do you see coming ahead? What is for either Palmer Holland or the industry in general?
I think in a few things. I certainly see, merger and acquisition activity to continue, at all levels, strategic, financial. I think private equity will emerge more so than even now. I think, seen some recent deals done with some notable private equity firms that, again, up till now might have played more in the manufacturing space or even the customer space, like customers, and now they're entering distribution.
Sure.
We talked about sustainability, digitalization, the supply piece. One thing that I believe, to an extent, a result of the pandemic, but we're seeing it in our world, is again probably something more so. A lot of our customers, for instance, over the years, there's a lot of offshore competition, and it's good competition. They're quality products that come in from, primarily Asia, that, recently have tended to have a lower cost position, and they've been pretty competitive, tariffs notwithstanding. Well, I think with what's happened both with the pandemic and now what's going on with global supply chain constraints, not probably being quite as dependent, the customer base on those products, maybe bringing back a portion of the spend to, I'll just say, the Western Hemisphere, where the supply chains are shorter and maybe there's a little more confidence in getting product from point A to point B. So I think you'll see a little bit of a drift back in that direction over the next 5 to 10 years.
Yeah, that makes sense.
If I had to say, moving forward, I think the companies in our space all excel on the sales side. They all excel on the logistics side. Short of e-commerce and digitalization, I think just an area where companies will probably begin to set themselves apart is more so on the marketing side. So
what does that look like to you?
Well, it really, what I would say is maybe where that responsibility historically has fallen to the manufacturer, commercial insight, thought leadership, market trends, that sort of thing. We're seeing, principals and customers alike looking more and more to distribution to provide that type of information, to provide that type of guidance, in the marketplace. So, which is fun, a little bit different and an area for us to grow.
Yeah, and it maybe requires you to change maybe some of your organization and staffing, I guess, to beef up more of that market intensive focus.
Yep, absolutely.
Interesting. Well, this has been really good. So, on a flip side, so let's just talk about in what do you do for fun, Ron? I mean, so, do you have time for fun, especially in this crazy 12 months that we've seen, 12 or 18 months that we've seen? What do you do when you step outside the office?
If you ask anybody I work with, they tell you I work, but that's not true. I love to fish. I love to boat. Anything on, in, around water, you can
Awesome.
you can convince me to partake, which is a lot of fun. I know right before we got started, you were talking about your dogs. We've got 3 dogs, so I enjoy spending time playing with the dogs out in the yard. Really, I mean, it sounds maybe a little boring, but I think just spending time with family and friends and neighbors. I'm not one. I like to travel. Often. I've had the opportunity to do a lot of travel with work over the years. Last year kind of brought that to a screeching halt. So I'm looking forward to getting back to doing a little more traveling because I do enjoy that. And then I guess, finally I've got a high school junior at home that's, going to be a senior shortly. So that's starting to consume outside time. It's exciting. So, the whole looking for colleges and that sort of thing.
Yeah. I've been going through that with my oldest. So it is quite a process.
Yeah. And right now it's really a process. So
yeah, absolutely. Well, good. Ron, thank you so much for your time. I've really enjoyed speaking with you. And I know that people are going to be delighted to hear about your perspectives on the chemical industry and distribution. So thanks for joining today.
No, it was my pleasure. I'm glad to have had the opportunity. And, as I mentioned, I've been watching these podcasts. They're great. I love the exposure that the chemical industry is getting by way of what you're doing. And, if I or, any of my colleagues can ever be of help on something like this in the future, just say the word.
Absolutely. Love it. And one final, how can people find you or Palmer Holland?
Easiest way, a couple ways. I mean, certainly our website, www.palmerholland.com. And that not only can get you to Palmer, but can get you to me personally. My contact information's out there. And then I'd like to think we do a pretty good job on the social media front. So both as a company and personally, we've got LinkedIn profiles, Twitter profiles, Facebook profiles. So pretty easy to find us.
All right. That's awesome. Thank you. And thanks for joining the Chemical Show.
Thanks, Victoria.
We've come to the end of today's podcast. We hope you enjoyed your time with us and want to learn more. Simply visit thechemicalshow.com for additional information and helpful resources. Join us again next time here on The Chemical Show with Victoria Meyer.